Everybody. I have some really exciting stuff to talk about today. A little over 100 years ago, maybe 130 or so, the Fillmores came together, Charles and Myrtle, and they were spiritual researchers. Charles Fillmore studied all the religions of the world, and he found things in each religion that were compatible to other religions. So he brought all of those truth principles together. But he is also out looking at other means of spirituality, and he incorporated those into the unity beliefs. It wasn't a standalone denomination. He insisted that unity never be that. They never had their own unique creed, which was unique to them and not to be used by anybody else, but rather it's a combination of all these different ways to discover more about who we are and what we are. And we've continued with that. On Monday nights, we have Course in Miracles, which is a wonderful spiritual study course that is very compatible to unity. But about 3 years ago, we noticed that there was something coming about which was catching on quite rapidly, and it was called the Enneagram. And the Enneagram is derived from ancient wisdom, and it is totally devoted, from what I understand, to helping us build better relationships. 80% of all the experience we have here in life is a result of the experiences we have with other people. 80%. Now think about that. That means 80% of your anger comes from other people, but so does 80% of your happiness. We're bound to each other. We thrive for that connection that comes about. So any help we can get in creating a stronger foundation for our relationships and moving forward is going to be one of the best things we can do to have an increase in our well-being. So when Nhien and I sat down about 2 years ago, we noticed this. She quickly became a student of it, and pretty soon her reputation traveled. Unity Village and the seminary called her out there to teach classes and do certain things. She spoke at a conference in California, and pretty soon all over the country, people were coming to Nhien for a variety of different reasons. There was a minister down in Wichita in a Methodist church. He wants her to come down there once a month to train their staff. People call in from other areas a long, long ways away just for a 1-hour counseling session. Anyway, I'm bringing this all about because it's exciting for us to be on the cutting edge of this and have somebody that I feel is the very best person to represent the Enneagram in this part of the country, or maybe the country as a whole. So I'd like to ask her to come forward. Nhien, will you please come forward? We might need to borrow some chairs here. Hi. I'd like to have this one.
Wait, okay.
No, this one. Anyway, the thing with religion is it comes to a point where it pretty much stands still. And we see this specifically with a lot of the traditional churches. They don't progress, they don't evolve, they don't move forward into higher levels of consciousness, or they don't throw themselves into new things that might be able to improve the message that they give to the people. So with this Enneagram and Nhien creating the Enneagram Institute right here at Unity Temple, I think that we should all maybe learn a little bit more about it. So tell me, Nhien, what is this Enneagram all about? And how does it, how is it compatible with unity?
Well, that's a big question. But the Enneagram, the Enneagram is superficially known nowadays as a personality typing system. But what it truly is, it's a map of consciousness that originated in just ancient times, and only in like the last several decades has it been applied to personality. But as a map of consciousness, here in Unity, we basically teach that the nature of life is pure consciousness, that's what God is, that's what spirit is. We call it divine mind, if you will. And so here, like in many churches, we're like, let's live more peacefully. Let's be more loving. And for me, when we talk abstractly about those things, it can be very hard to apply that to our lives. We go to church on Sundays and it's like, rah, rah, I'm inspired. But then we go back into our daily lives and we're like, how on earth do I love my perceived enemies? How do I love people with very apparently disparate views from my own? How do I love after I've been hurt by someone? And for me, what the Enneagram does is it maps where you are sort of on the spectrum of consciousness so that it can guide you as a roadmap back into a space where we're grounded in our wholeness. If you've ever seen the Enneagram image, it's basically a circle with 9 dots inscribed around it. And, again, a lot of people think, oh, those 9 dots, those are the 9 personality types. But in essence, the circle actually represents the fact that we see each and every one of you as fundamentally whole and perfect. That the truth of who you are is not a type, but rather why the Enneagram typing helps is that it names exactly your particular, we all have our own brand of crazy, right? So it names your brand of crazy, the way in which we have a limiting belief about the world and about ourselves. And so fundamentally, the way that this accords with unity is that basic idea, we were born in original blessing, not in original sin, that we are whole. It's only our own self-delusion that keeps us from knowing that. And so when we're just operating out of that, what happens is we don't even see, you might have heard of the idea of transparent beliefs. It's the idea that we look at the world through a certain lens, but the lens is often transparent to us. It's not to other people around us usually, right? But we don't even know that we're filtering through this lens of either black and white thinking, right or wrong, or I'm unworthy, whatever that lens is, everything gets interpreted through that. But when you know your type, it's like you can offset it. If you know that the mirror says objects are closer than they appear, you can offset for that and account for that. So that's in a very brief nutshell, the value of the Enneagram and how it's steeped in the sense of innate wholeness. It's not that we have to grow, it's that we need to awaken to the wholeness that is already here present, both within each of us, but also among us. So.
Well, we leave here on Sunday, as you say, with a peace of mind, a peaceful heart, and a peaceful spirit. Praise God, I'm going to go out into the world and spread my joy and just have a wonderful time. But it doesn't always end up like that, especially during these tumultuous political times. And I don't get engaged in that, but I'm at places where politics come up, somebody starts arguing, people start yelling at each other, and it just gets vicious. Instead of being able to listen to somebody else's viewpoints and just say thank you for sharing and then move on. So for this particular problem I have, trying to find harmony out there in all these disharmonious spots, what can the Enneagram do for me?
Well, what it supports you in is the very song that we always sing at the end of service, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. But so often that effort to begin the act of generating peace or peacemaking is a willpower kind of effort. It comes from, I perceive conflict, I perceive that you are wrong and I am right, but I'm going to try to be a noble person, right? And so I will make an effort to reconcile. But it comes already from the premise that is false, right? Which is that there is something wrong with the way you're thinking versus me. It starts with that. So the beauty of the Enneagram is the first bridge we build, in a way. It's not the bridge we build between one another, but it's the bridge we build between, basically the false or limited notion of yourself that, as great as you even might think you are, or as horrible as you might think you are, you're not right. That idea, and then to sink down below that into a space where you are in touch with, that we are each in touch with something truer about us that schools us on who we are. It's not something our head, our conscious mind does. It's done through prayer and meditation. So the first journey in learning the Enneagram is like, oh, what is my particular brand of false beliefs? So that I can wake up to truth, reality as it truly is, and not seen through my filter. Then from the inside out, then I use my knowledge of different types to go, oh, you know, if I am honest with myself, then there are certain things that are so difficult for me to get over. You know, it might be that I have anxiety about money, or it might be that I have recurring insecurities about self-worth, deservedness in relationship. You know, it might be that I have a recurring theme of sabotaging, running, leaving from everything. You know, if I can sink into how challenging that is for me, how embedded in my own structure is, then even if I don't have the same problem you have, I can have more compassion for how you get stuck in a way that is fundamentally different from the way that I get stuck. And so that begins a path of just overflowing compassion for the other that seeks to say, oh, it's not, you know, I remember in college when I had my first aha, I was like, I want my parents to understand me, you know, I want them to understand me. And then I read this quote, communication does not begin with being understood, it begins with understanding others. And we know that, and we say that, you know, and then we leave this room, and it's like, oh, see, they need to change. You know, but instead it's like, oh, really? Can you feel how hard that is for them to let go of that? Can you feel how hard it is for you if you're one of the more like lackadaisical Enneagram types, for you to just get up and take action when that's so difficult for you? You know, and so when we can feel into that, there's just a deeper way of holding and embracing one another, you know. And so yeah, you know, peace on earth. You know, it's a little idealistic, but I am a minister. I believe the Enneagram can bring peace on earth. You know, like just from what I've seen in the communities that are growing here. In our Enneagram groups here at Unity Temple, like where all of this started, you know, Duke mentioned that I was invited to California. It was to a global conference to talk specifically about the groups that are here at Unity Temple. And it was basically, there are pagans and there are devout Catholics who still go to church on Sundays in our groups here. And somehow they managed to be in the same room together. And then they managed to start to actually love each other in ways where my joke is, you know, have you ever been in like an office where like there are birthdays and it's on the calendar, and when it's someone's birthday, everyone does the real ritual of getting the cake and stuff, but it doesn't come from that organic place. You know, I see what happens in our groups that amazes me is the moment you say there's something special going on, either someone's in the hospital or someone's celebrating a birthday, the natural impulse to be like, this is part of my family, this is my community, I want to come, I want to serve, is just so ever present. You know, and that to me is probably one of the biggest testaments to the work. You know, centering prayer is the primary spiritual practice that we do in our Enneagram groups. It also happens to be the core meditation practice taught in Reverend Paul Hasselbeck's Heart-Centered Metaphysics, which is the Unity textbook that we all study in seminary. You know, and centering prayer is this act of surrender, you know, surrendering who you think you are, what you think you know, for that within you, which is more loving, more peaceful, and more powerful, wiser than what any of our conscious minds can discern or be or act into, if you will. So what happens in these groups that I've seen is an emergence of this thing that is universal within us, you know? Like there's something, the Enneagram points to universal archetypes that cross different gender identification, sexual orientation, you know, race, religion even religion, belief systems, because it points to something universal in all of us, the ways that we suffer. So That's my short answer, believe it or not.
Well, thank you very much for that. You know, I've always been told that the greatest degree of love that we can experience is the love that we have for ourselves. And so we have a lukewarm love for ourselves. We can never love anybody out there more than that because we don't know more than that.
Right.
It all begins with the self. So that unconditional love of the self frees us, I think, to not be so critical or harshly judgmental to people out there where we see characteristics that we're ashamed of in ourselves. So what is the solution to that? Why is low self-esteem and feelings of inferiority such a almost an epidemic in this country especially, but humanity across the world? None of us I shouldn't say none of us, all of us at some point feel a rejection of the self. There's times when we don't like the self, when we're guilty or when we're shameful of things that we've done. I see that as from an emotional response just as big as any of the physical maladies that are challenging us right now, like cancer and some other things. So why is that, and can you fix us?
So let me kind of start with like a basic framework. If you look at the Enneagram, inside you'll see like a triangle. The triangle goes with the numbers 9, 6, and 3. And that triangle, representing consciousness, actually represents what we call the fall. In almost every spiritual tradition, Buddhism, Christianity, there's this notion of the fall from grace. But what that represents is, it's interesting you mentioned that. At the top, holy love is represented at point 9. And the idea is that all of us, at some point, coming into this world, is about having lost sight of our connection to this, like, the fundamental, like, that we're one with God, that we don't know that. And as a result, we dip down into type 6, which is the fear-based type. And 6 is like this existential angst that, like, oh my gosh, I've separated from oneness. Now I have to hustle, right? And then at point 3, that's the persona that all of us have at our Enneagram types, which is, what's my particular form of hustle? If I don't believe that everything is truly for me, and even though I say I believe that, at depth I don't, then I get attached to that persona, which is the mask that I wear. And so what I love about your question, Duke, is I think that a lot of times when we talk about self-love in our society, what we're often doing is practicing loving the persona. It's sort of like, oh, let's speak in a mirror and affirm the worth. I am accomplished. I am successful. I am beautiful. These things that are like upholding the mask, but that never touches us at depth. And so for me, this idea that once we understand that the thing that we tend to think we are, the thing that we defend, oh no, I'm a generous, good person, that when we let go of that defense, A Course in Miracles teaches our safety lies in our defenselessness. When we surrender that outer defense of who we think we are, it's scary because we think we were loved at all, if at all, for that, right? But if we let go of that, then beneath that we can sink into something more profoundly solid. And I can even give a personal example. There was a time, those of you who've been here for a while know that within my story, there was a time where I couldn't even speak in front of 10 people. I'd be shaking so badly out of fear. And this morning, oh my goodness, I woke up with an allergic reaction to something I ate. And like half of my tongue was swollen at 5:30 today. And at the old, and like I was like, blah, blah, blah. I was lisping. It was like horrendous, and I'm looking in the mirror, my tongue's swollen. The old me would have been so upset. You are thwarting my ego's desire to convey this teaching and, improve lives, be a do, And I just thought, whatever's going to unfold, I'm going to do my best. And if I can love myself through that, I will have lived what I teach. That this gentleness about, It's going to work out however it works out, and you might be stuttering, lisping through your whole talk today. But the fact that I was even okay with that is monumentally different from how I would have been just even 5 years ago. And so the work, they say in centering prayer that the fruits of the practice are not in the practice, meaning during the meditation, it might feel like it sucks, and there's thoughts, and there's all this stuff. The fruits of the practice are not in the practice, but in your life. And so just one day, you realize what you used to react to, you don't. What used to bother and trigger you just doesn't. And then when you participate in community, as many of you here are, I see many faces from our classes, you get to witness it across the room. And many people don't see it at first in themselves, but they see it in other people in that room. And it inspires and encourages. And it's profound to witness people waking up to like a gentler self, a self that is at peace, not because everything is together at all, but the true peace that is there despite that, and the peace that we can bring to the world because we have that, not because we're talking about that, but because we're embodying it, because we're claiming it, and that only happens through awareness of how do you, in particular, block yourself from that. And how can we together, in community, give ourselves permission to break open so that we can open into that truth more fully, embodied truth.
Thank you very much. Now, you have an introductory class today at 1 o'clock.
Yes.
So if somebody comes to that, what can they expect in 1 minute or less?
In 1 minute or less. What can they expect? We're going to do an overview of the 9 types. I hope that you see it really just as an invitation and an introduction, because there's no way that the depth of the Enneagram can be conveyed even in 3 hours. But what you'll do is you get an overview. Chances are many of you will recognize first your spouses, your children, and then maybe you last. But you'll see the different personas, and then we'll explore how the different types relate to themselves and how they relate to other people. So you can begin to understand, why does that person have to be so belligerent? Well, if you come from a perspective that the world is dangerous and you have to be big and show strength, then that's how you're going to be. If you get that, right? Why is that person so meek? Oh, well, if you come from the perspective that fundamentally you don't matter, you're going to be timid in your speech. When we can have compassion and understanding for the different ways that we each try so hard each day to show up, then we can begin to build bridges, between one another and from our heads to our own hearts and into our own beings. So that's today, if you're interested in that. Yeah.
And would you feel free to do the meditation for us?
Okay.
Good.
Okay.
We'll now move into meditation.